We can go?
Yes.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Guillaume Vallet. I am a professor of economics at the University of Grenoble-Alpes, France. And I will be the chair of this session. And this is my pleasure today to welcome Mathew FORSTATER, a professor of economics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, USA. And today, Professor FORSTATER will present a paper entitled "The Matter is Social, the Social Matters, but what is most important is provisioning." So, Professor FORSTATER, the floor is yours, and thank you very much for this presentation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your moderating today, and I also want to thank Professor Gensch and for inviting me, and also just extend my congratulations to RePEcT, or the group, for their wonderful wonderful program. So often I say to my introductory students, economics, it may be the only field of study where its practitioners disagree as to what it is they're studying. Basically, I'm putting forward the I don't think controversial idea that there are sort of two broad categories of defining the object of study of economics. One everyone is familiar with. It's the mainstream textbook definition, the allocation of scarce resources among competing ends. The other is more or less the idea that economics is concerned with how societies organize themselves to provide for their material well-being. So,
Matthew, sorry to disrupt you. Can you put your slides in full screen, please?
Surely.
Thank you very much. Excuse me.
Okay.
Perfect. That's perfect.
Thank you. So let's think about the first one. Probably many of historians of economic thought know that the textbook definition goes back to Lionel Robbins and his essay on the nature and significance of economic science. 1932, he was at the London School of Economics. He brought Hayek to LSE, and it becomes, as I say, the textbook definition in conventional economics. Sometimes this way of defining economics is so pervasive that it's actually referred to as the economic way of thinking. The idea of economics as concerned with provisioning, and one of the main purposes of my presentation is to document that Robert Heilbronner, in terms of modern economics, he has been the key promoter of the provisioning definition. He started in the 1950s, even before he received his PhD. He had published several books that the worldly philosophers, I'm sure everyone is familiar with. He was a graduate student when he published that, and of course it became one of the best-selling books. So in the 1960s and from the early 1960s, and in at least 5 different textbooks. Some of these are co-authored with Lester Thoreau from MIT or Jamie Galbraith, University of Texas. He used the terms material provisioning, social provisioning, and economic provisioning, I would say more or less interchangeably. And so by institutionalizing this alternative definition of economics and the economy, I should say, obviously, in textbooks, that went, quite a way to making this a viable alternative. And that was also supported, as we're going to see, outside of economics in a number of other fields, particularly anthropology, archaeology, and history. So I was a little bit surprised around 20 years ago or so when Fred Lee joined our department at UMKC, and I never realized that there was sort of a debate within the provisioning approach between those who sort of rejected the as inadequate the notion of material provisioning and what an effort to replace material provisioning with social provisioning. So Deborah Figart from Stockton College, a feminist and social economist, institutionalist, in her presidential address to the Association for Social Economics, and then Fred in many of his writings and a number of his students have also sort of taken up this argument as well. The two of them usually will cite Julie Nelson, feminist economist, Bill Duggar, institutionalist, Marilyn Power, also a feminist for many years, was at Sarah Lawrence, and the institutionalist Alan Grushi, who was at the University of Maryland for many years. You don't find any mention of Heilbronner as coining the term social provisioning. If Heilbronner is mentioned at all, it is to criticize his use of the term material provisioning. Interestingly, in a Festschrift for Fred Lee, there's a little autobiographical piece, and he mentions in there that The Worldly Philosophers was the first economics book he read, and his first economic classes were taken at the New School when Heilbronner and his teacher and mentor Adolf Lowe were still teaching, still active. Although, again, Heilbronner is not mentioned in connection with the term social provisioning, or often at all. So Adolf Lowe and Heilbronner did not claim to have, that this was an original idea of theirs, but rather that this idea of the economy as concerned with provisioning was the one that you find in the classical political economists, Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and so on, the physiocrats, obviously, and as well, Marx, Veblen, and the institutionalist tradition, and others, say, worldly philosopher types, as well as outside of economics, as I say, anthropology, archaeology, and history all use the term often material provisioning, but in any case, provisioning. So I sort of came up with like a thought experiment. Let's take the set of all that is social. Now let's remove all the members of that set that are material. What's left? I'm not clear that there's anything left at all. Marx once referred to Joseph Dietzken as our philosopher. He wrote a book in 1869, The Nature of Human Brain Work, which is nowadays, these are no astounding statements, but I think in 1869. So breaking down this dichotomous treatment of the material and the ideal, or the world of ideas, consciousness, and so on. So the intangible idea is also material and real. He, talks about the scent of a rose, the heat of a stove. So obviously, material is not physical, as in the sense of something solid. Many things that we cannot see with the naked eye obviously are material. The mind is material. A gentle breeze, the sound of John Coltrane's saxophone, right? Things that we maybe perceive with our other senses. And so there's actually, I discovered an entire field in and around organizational studies and science studies, STS, science, technology, and society studies, sociomateriality. The social and the material are considered to be inextricably related. There is no social that is not also material, and no material that is not also social. Orlikowski, the previous quote was from, is often cited in this regard. Leonardi is another name in this field. The social and material are so fundamentally related that it makes little sense to talk about one without talking about the other. And Latour is referred to often in this regard as well. But we also go back to Raymond Williams, the great English Marxist and author of Marxism and Literature, talking about, in his discussion of ideology, consciousness and its products are always parts of the material social process itself, whether what Marx called the necessary element of imagination in the labor process, necessary conditions of associated labor, language, practical ideas of relationship, and which is so often and significantly forgotten in the real processes, all of them physical and material, most of them manifestly so, which are masked and idealized as consciousness and its products, but which, when seen without illusions, are themselves necessarily social material activities. And Stefan Feuchtwang, an anthropologist and a famous little study, the separation of consciousness or the ideal from non-consciousness or the social as independent factors of human reality, either takes ideas and consciousness out of social reality or divides every social unity into two aspects along the same categorical lines. Marx's materialism precisely is not a fundamental categorical separation of thought from material human being. Ideological production, the production and communication of ideas, is no more purely ideal a practice than economic production is purely material. It is nothing if it is not social. Since ideologies are social, they are qualities of historically specific relations between concrete individuals, and so they are material. So obviously, material in the sense of material provisioning, I mean, the word, many words have their everyday usage and then their usage in philosophy and scholarship. So obviously, material is not physical, certainly not a solid, right? But also another sort of puzzling implication of some of the critiques of the term material provisioning by those who would like to use social provisioning is that material has to do with kind of material, being materialistic, that it's associated with money making or market activity, and therefore would not include many other important, absolutely crucial, what Antonella Picchio calls the work of social reproduction. And of course, household work, unpaid labor, volunteer work, community cooperation, and so on and so forth. So I guess the most important example that Deb Figart brings up is care. So care is part of social reproduction. We do not live by bread alone. We have emotional needs, psychological needs, and so on and so forth. But I'd like to propose we think about effective care in the sense of like effective as in effective demand, right? So effective care, I cannot imagine what it would consist of if it was not comprised of activities that are material, whether a voice, a calming voice, whether gestures, whether physical affection, like language, like signs. There is no exterior reality that is in any way connected to some kind of, let's say, feeling, unless it is put into practice, put into action in some sense or another. Care very much is a socio-material activity. So, one of my concerns, I guess, is that economics imperialism, not economic imperialism, but economics imperialism, where economics is copied by other social sciences, and economics, because of that, the Robbins definition, it basically constrained maximization, then all constrained decision making of whatever aspect of social life becomes a part of economics, which is why you can open up the American Economic Review and see articles that are about things that most people would be very surprised. What is this doing in an economics journal? How kids choose which sorority to join, or whatever. If it involves any type of decision making in the context of constraints, then it's economics, or it's the proper object for economics. I sometimes am afraid that when we say things like ethics needs to be part of economics, I fear that some economists hear that as economists should be in charge of ethics. Well, I don't think so. I think, economists and, alternative or heterodox approaches have to be careful as well of not slipping into a similar type of broadening of the scope of economics so that it becomes everything. Rather, it seems like economics needs to be, as Heilbronner put it in the title of the article this quote comes from, putting economics in its place. Art, culture, civil society, good government may be the most highly regarded social achievements, but they all rest on a foundation of social provisioning, without which none of them could long endure. So I would say social reproduction, material provisioning, sustainable prosperity. These are all different ways of getting at the production and reproduction of life, which is part of what economics is supposed to be about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. It was really interesting and insightful. I really appreciated particularly your point on the effective care. I think it's very important to mention this. And to me, this reminds me some thoughts that many very interesting researchers and scholars conducted a century ago, especially during the American progressive era. And specifically, I turned recently to a feminist named Charlotte Perkins Gilman, and she, of course, she didn't use the term social provisioning, but I think that the idea of social provisioning appears consistent with Gilman's New Women. She coined the among many other feminists, but she coined this term at the time, New Women, in the general struggle for women's empowerment and critique of men's use of economic resources. And I think that your presentation is very interesting, in my view, to understand that capitalism may not be viable without a radical deconstruction of the economy, the current economic system, and because I mentioned Gilman, the gendered economic system, because this system is associated with maleness and power, competition and individualism, And I think that resting on your presentation, resting on this concept of social provisioning, encompassing material and social, which are intertwined, as you said, is very, very interesting. And to me, it opens very important research. And thank you very much for this very good presentation. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for that. Those kind words, and certainly Charlotte Perkins Gilman is sort of seen as an anticipator of feminist economics, or an early, feminist economist, and for because of the amount of time, I didn't really get to say, but I should, that I accept basically, most all of the critique and proposed modifications of economics by feminist economics, and in terms of not creating this split between wage work and unpaid labor, between household and home and raising children and so on, those things that are counted in GNP and those things that are not, and all. I accept all of that, and I mean, that those are areas, which many much earlier work needs to be redone and reconsidered in light of the importance of social work, of social reproduction, care, and so on and so forth.
Thank you very much, and this is why I really appreciated your your presentation. And likewise, I would like to know more about what you said on the connection between economics, or the social sciences at large, and ethics. Because once again, a century ago, academics of the progressive era raised this issue. Most of them were very close even to Christian morals. And they considered, for instance, when they founded the American Economic Association, that it was necessary to rest on morals to build the economic discipline. Can you say more words on that? I think you raised a very interesting issue.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we know, like, at one time, political economy really included what eventually was split up into economics, sociology, political science, what later we would think of as, but also history and moral philosophy. Adam Smith was a professor of moral philosophy. He wrote the Theory of Moral Sentiments, and not only the Wealth of Nations. The contemporary Scottish school of political economy. So people like A.L. McPhee and D.D. Raphael and Andrew Skinner and so on, Ronald Meek, but also, although not Scottish, Heilbronner. They all felt that you could only really understand what Smith was trying to do in The Wealth of Nations with the Theory of Moral Sentiments, and as well the lectures on jurisprudence, which he was never able to complete. But I think the evidence now, and now it's a lot more common, but at one time, Das Adam Smith problem. How could, someone who says self-interest is the driving force of human behavior in an earlier book say that, sympathy, what we today would call empathy, is the social cement necessary for a well-functioning society, and that the Adam Smith, as the journalist Sylvia Nasser years ago wrote an article, Adam Smith is no Gordon Gekko. Gordon Gekko from the movie Wall Street, where the first one where Michael Douglas gives the speech, "Greed is good," as though, if everyone behaves in a completely greedy way, that's actually doing something, ethical. Not only, and trying to help people, that's actually unethical, so everything gets turned around upside down. And so, yeah, there's a lot of complicated history that we don't have time to, go into. But I think we got off track when we decided that we wanted to make economics a science in a way that not even, most good natural scientists would go along with that kind of conception. It's kind of an old conception of science as value-free and so on. Now, you got to be careful these days, because we don't want to be, science as problem solving, science as inquiry, absolutely crucial. And with the issues today like climate change or vaccinations and things like this, we don't want to give the wrong idea here. But yeah, I think that ethics really needs to be returned, and you have important even within the mainstream, Amartya Sen. Maybe he's on the sort of edges or whatever, but people who have made this argument quite strong, that ethics must be a part. And in fact, George DiMartino, who has an excellent book on justice from University of Denver, he had made the proposal years ago that economists should take a Hippocratic oath, right? Do no harm. Because the policy implications of economics are, for better or for worse, so much more direct than in, some other fields of study. And so we really, medical doctors are not the only ones who need to. Anytime you're in a profession that has an impact on people the way that economic livelihoods do, I feel it comes with a extra responsibility.
Thank you very much, Professor FORSTATER. It was very interesting, and this will be the final words, because we have to finish this session and to turn to the other one. It was very interesting, and I hope we'll keep in touch, because social provisioning is definitely a key issue in economics